You wake up in the middle of the night. The baby monitor crackles. Through the static, a voice, small, soft, whispers,
"Mommy, don't leave me."
but your child is asleep beside you. Welcome to the Sally house, a place where tragedy lingers, where grief festers, and where a little girl's spirit is anything but innocent. In the quiet town of Atchison, Kansas, nestled among rows of aging houses, stands a home with a past that refuses to stay buried. Locals know it well. Whispers of the Sally house drift on the wind like the rustling leaves in October. To outsiders, it's just another old Victorian. But those who dare step inside often find they're not alone. Originally built in the late 1800s, the home was once the proud residence of Dr. Charles Finney and his family. The doctor ran his medical practice from the first floor, tending to the sick and injured of the town. But one stormy night, as thunder cracked across the Kansas sky, a frantic mother arrived at the doorstep, clutching her young daughter, Sally. She was doubled over in pain. When Dr. Finney realized that the girl's appendix was on the verge of rupture, he made a decision that would doom them all. He opted to perform her surgery at his residence, without any anesthesia. Sally screamed, until she didn't. Her final breath, a terrified gasp. Her death, not peaceful, not painless. Her mother fled, leaving her child's body behind. No one knows what Dr. Finney did with Sally's remains. He never spoke of that night again. All that was known was that Sally was gone, and something of her had stayed behind. Over the years, death continued to shadow the house. 4 members of the Finney family passed away within its walls. Families came and went, some staying only briefly, but none left a mark quite like the Pickmans. Tony and Debbie Pickman, young, in love, dreaming of a family, moved into the house in the early 1990s. It was vintage, charming, perfect, until it wasn't. They began to experience strange, sometimes even violent occurrences. Lights dimmed on their own. Their dog barked at empty corners. Shadows stretched where they shouldn't. Debbie Pickman, who longed to be a mother with every bit of her heart, felt an inexplicable connection to the nursery. Though she struggled with infertility, she was drawn to that quiet room. It was as if someone was already there. Then came the whispers. A child's voice, soft and sorrowful, echoed from the walls. Debbie started talking to the spirit. After learning the home's history and the story of Sally, the Pickmans tried to embrace her as a sort of phantom daughter. A quiet bond formed. Debbie spoke to Sally as if she were her own child, and for a time, it comforted them both. But spirits don't love the way we do. Sally's life was full of pain and neglect. Her parents never loved her, never cared for her. One night, her suffering ended. Her appendix ruptured. But was it the sickness that took her life, or the cruelty of her parents? Alone, abandoned, forgotten. Sallie's restless spirit lingered, desperately reaching for the comfort of a mother's embrace. But love, even from beyond the veil, can twist. Debbie became pregnant. At first, Sallie seemed happy, but that joy turned to jealousy. What once felt like comfort became menace. Sallie, who had never known a mother's love in life, now faced being replaced in death. The bond cracked. Sallie's envy grew. Tony, increasingly alarmed, tried to protect his wife and unborn child. He kept Debbie away from the nursery, but the doors opened on their own. After their son was born, the house's activity surged. The baby cried all night. The nursery grew colder. Lights glowed long after they were turned off. Dark mold began to creep along the walls. And then, Debbie found all the baby's stuffed animals placed in a perfect circle on the nursery floor. Terrified, the couple fled to a relative's home for the night. But as they were leaving, Tony felt a searing pain across his back. 3 deep red scratches, fresh, angry, bleeding. Something had lashed out at him, something unseen. Sallie was no longer a lonely child. She was possessive and dangerous. That was the breaking point. Tony never returned. But Debbie needed closure. She made one final trip back, not to reclaim the house, but to say goodbye. She stepped into the nursery, whispered softly,
"Goodbye."
And something understood. Sallie let her go, because love cannot be kept by force. The Pickmans left, but Sallie remained, a lonely soul, forever bound to the place where her life ended too soon, trapped in a loop of love, twisted by death. She lingers still, waiting for someone who might see past the flickering lights and chilling whispers to the child lost within. Years later, in the early 2000s, paranormal investigators uncovered something unsettling. A faded pentagram was discovered in the basement, etched into the concrete floor. Evidence of dark rituals, burnt offerings, symbols of the occult. A luminol test in the master bedroom closet revealed glowing stains, like ghostly fingerprints, traces of blood, long cleaned, but never truly gone. The Sallie house still stands in Atchison, Kansas, a monument to grief, to longing, and to the powerful bond between mother and child, one that transcends even death. Lights flicker, cold drafts slip beneath locked doors, and within its walls, in the silence, a little girl still waits. Welcome to Phantom Tales. If you don't believe in ghosts, you will. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And don't forget, leave a light on tonight. In the heart of Kansas City, Missouri, where modern high-rises meet Victorian elegance, stands a place untouched by time, the Hotel Savoy. Built in 1888, It remains one of the oldest surviving hotels west of the Mississippi. It is a living memory of Kansas City's golden era. It's a place of power, prestige, and privilege. President Harry S. Truman dined here often. Oil barons, railroad tycoons, and even famed entertainers passed through its doors. The Savoy Grill's booth number 4, reserved for Truman, still sits preserved. A monument to legacy. Once buzzing with wealth and laughter, now whispers with stories untold. But history is not all that the hotel preserves. While the chandeliers shine and the walls gleam, the air still carries something old, something unfinished. Whispers echo through its halls. Doors open by themselves. Music plays when no one is around. Mirrors reflect what isn't there. Here, some guests never checked out. No corner of the hotel held more chilling infamy than room 505. It was a place where dread seemed to seep from the very wallpaper, a room whispered about in hushed tones, its reputation preceding it like a shroud. Its last long-term resident, Betsy Ward, met her end there in the late 1980s, her death shrouded in a fog of conflicting rumors. Some said a heart attack claimed her in the clawfoot tub, others that she passed peacefully in her sleep. Yet, the unsettling truth was that her presence had never departed. Witnesses described Betsy as a gaunt, almost ethereal woman in her early 60s. Her skin was unnaturally pale, her high cheekbones casting dramatic shadows in the dim light of a flickering candle. Her silver blonde hair, perpetually damp and curling at the ends, often hung heavy over her shoulders, as if she'd just emerged from a long, cold soak. She frequently appeared in a faded blue nightgown, its hem inexplicably stained, as if she'd just stepped out of the tub, or perhaps had dragged herself from the grave. Guests brave enough to endure a night in 505 spoke of seeing her by the bathroom mirror, her translucent fingers raking a worn ivory comb through her wet hair. Others caught glimpses of her seated at the edge of the bed, a spectral silhouette outlined by the city's distant streetlights, her gaze fixed on something unseen beyond the windowpane. Then came the renovation. As workers peeled back decades of wallpaper and plaster, they unearthed a chilling secret. A sealed handgun, tucked away deep within the wall of room 505. The discovery shattered any illusion of a natural death, fueling dark theories of foul play, a violent end that had tethered Betsy to her final resting place. Larry Freeman, a tenant in room 505 in the early 1990s, recounted a string of unsettling events that blurred the line between the living and the dead. The shower, without warning, would turn on and off, its icy spray an unseen hand in the silence. A soft, melancholic jazz tune would drift from an unplugged radio, a phantom melody that played only for him. Most unnerving of all, the massive sliding oak door, heavy and solid, would glide open by itself, revealing only the empty hallway beyond. "She looked at me," Larry once whispered, his voice still edged with an ancient fear, not angry, not sad, just lost, like she forgot she was dead. Even Sean Burns, the building manager, a man of logic and practicality, couldn't deny the inexplicable. He'd heard the music, faint and ethereal, wafting from room 505 when he knew it was empty. Upon entering, the phantom notes would cease, leaving behind only an overpowering, lingering scent of lavender bath oil, a scent that clung to the air like a desperate memory. But Betsy was not the Savoy's sole resident from beyond the veil. On the fourth floor, a much smaller, more fragile spirit wandered the opulent halls. Emily, the Victorian girl. She appeared no older than 8 or 9, with porcelain-pale skin, large, fathomless brown eyes, and long, dark hair tied back with a faded ribbon. She wore a pristine white lace dress, complete with puffed sleeves, delicate pearl buttons, and a high collar that seemed too formal for a child. In her hand, clutched tightly to her chest, was a tattered stuffed rabbit, one button eye missing, its fur worn bare from countless embraces. Emily was most often seen at the far end of corridors, a silent sentinel near the grand staircase, or just outside guests' doors. She was always still, always watching, her large brown eyes unblinking, following the movements of the living with an unnerving intensity. Her presence was often heralded by the faint patter of tiny feet, barely audible, or a soft, almost imperceptible giggling that would send shivers down the spines of unsuspecting visitors. Sometimes it was just the overwhelming, chilling sensation of being watched from a corner known to be empty, a phantom gaze pressing in from the shadows. Guests, standing alone in front of the ornate hall mirrors late at night, sometimes caught a fleeting glimpse of her reflection, a ghostly image appearing just behind their own, only to vanish when they turned. While no official records mention a child's death in the hotel, a yellowed registry log from 1903 lists a mysterious entry. Miss E. Crawford, 9 years old, ill, room 412, quarantined. Psychics who visited the 4th floor claimed her name was Emily, a lost soul, waiting for her mother to come back. Many speculated she was the child of a wealthy family, struck down by illness and confined to her room, never to leave. She died alone in an era when children were hidden away from public life during sickness, within the very room she once called home, forever bound to its hallowed halls. "She doesn't blink," a seasoned housekeeper once whispered, her voice laced with a genuine tremor. "And when she looks at you, you remember her. You remember her long after she's gone." The Savoy also held a different kind of haunting, one born not of tragedy, but of an enduring love that defied the boundaries of life and death. In 1987, Reed Shaler, a young waiter, was bringing sugar to Mrs. Leitner, elderly, long-term resident. As he neared her door, he heard the soft murmur of her voice, as if she were engaged in conversation. Upon entering, he discovered her speaking not to herself, but to a distinguished gentleman standing in the room. It was her deceased husband, Fred Leitner. Fred was impeccably dressed in a sharp, double-breasted 1930s suit, his features undeniably lifelike, until, with a faint shimmer, he simply vanished before their astonished eyes. Mrs. Leitner, with an unsettling calm, merely smiled and explained, "That was my Fred. He visits sometimes." From that night forward, Reed's apartment, just floors below, became a stage for increasingly unsettling phenomena. His chifforobe, a heavy piece of furniture, would swing open by itself each morning. Candles, just lit, would inexplicably blow out, leaving him in sudden darkness. Personal belongings left neatly on his dresser would be moved or rearranged overnight, a silent, playful rearrangement by an unseen hand. Fred, it seemed, had taken an interest in him, a lingering presence unwilling to fully let go of the world he'd left behind. Not all encounters were rooted in the distant past. In the early 2000s, a woman named Francesca, seeking a serene, elegant retreat, checked into the newly refurbished Hotel Savoy. She envisioned quiet nights and luxurious solitude. What she found instead was a terror that drove her screaming into the pre-dawn streets. The moment she stepped into her closet, an overwhelming, suffocating smell of stale cigar smoke assailed her, clinging to her clothes and hair, despite the room being recently renovated and smoke-free. Deep, bone-chilling cold spots would manifest near her bed, raising goosebumps on her arms even under thick blankets. One night, as she drifted toward sleep, an unseen hand, cold and spectral, brushed through her hair, a touch so intimate and terrifying it jolted her awake, her heart hammering against her ribs. And then came the burning sensation, a searing heat that spread across her arm, leaving no visible mark, only the lingering, searing fear. She fled in the dead of night, her solo retreat shattered, her mind reeling. "Whatever was in that room didn't want me there," she later recounted, her voice still trembling with remembered horror. "It was aware. It saw me. And I wasn't welcome." The Hotel Savoy, now known as the 21C Museum Hotel Kansas City, and part of the Tapestry Collection by Hilton, stands today as a beacon of modern luxury, seamlessly blending its historical grandeur with contemporary art. The Savoy Grill, now Savoy at 21C, continues to serve patrons, its historic booth number 4 a quiet tribute to its past. Yet, for all its revitalization, the lingering shadows of its history persist. The current operators, while not openly marketing the hotel's haunted history on their official websites, cannot erase the whispers that have woven themselves into the very fabric of the building. The stories of Betsy Ward, Emily, Fred Leitner, and Francesca are not just tales. They are the unseen, unheard, and unsettling presence that continues to check in, even when no one is expected. The Hotel Savoy remains elegant, regal, and timeless, but if you truly listen closely in the hush of night, you might just hear the phantom faucet running in room 505, or a child's faint giggle echoing down the fourth-floor hall. You might feel the undeniable presence of unseen eyes watching you from a mirror that, unlike the living, holds no lies. Because in the heart of Kansas City, within the grand historic walls of the Savoy, some guests, it seems, check in and stay forever. Welcome to Phantom Tales. If you don't believe in ghosts, you will. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, in hotels, some guests never check out. They just fade. Have you ever heard a bell ring with no one there to ring it? They say if you hear the bell toll in Ellis, Kansas, when the storm comes and thunder cracks the sky, your fate's already sealed. In Kansas, the night sky can turn black without warning, and the wind carries whispers you're better off ignoring. On stormy nights, when thunder rattles the bones of the earth, the old Memorial Hall in Ellis remembers a desperate man, trapped beneath its floors, locked away, drowned by the rising floodwaters, and never released. This is the story of Earl Parkins and the bell that still tolls for those who dare to listen. On Sunday, June 16, 1957, Dark clouds churned like angry beasts above the town of Ellis, Kansas. A thin veil of dust whipped through the biting wind, swirling around abandoned storefronts and empty streets. Thunder rumbled distantly, a low warning that seemed to seep into the bones of the old memorial hall. Earl Parkins limped up the worn wooden steps, each creak echoing in the oppressive stillness. His boots were soaked, caked with mud, his torn shirt hanging loose from bruised shoulders. 42 years old, gaunt, hollow-eyed. Earl's breath came in ragged gasps, his wide eyes haunted by a storm far darker than the one overhead. He raised a shaking fist and pounded on the heavy oak door. "Please, I don't mean any trouble. Just need a place to stay, somewhere dry for the night." His voice cracked, raw with exhaustion and despair, trembling as if it might break entirely. The door creaked open, revealing a grizzled policeman, weathered by decades under the relentless Kansas sun, a thin toothpick clenched between cracked lips. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, narrowed as he studied Earl's trembling form. "Bus stations shut down for the night," the officer growled. "Town's had its fill of drifters lately, and hotels don't take your kind. Especially not with this storm brewing. Can't have you wandering about." Earl swallowed hard, swallowing more than just pride. "Lost my job in Garden City. No family, no money. Just passing through. I swear." His voice faltered, a flicker of something else. Regret, fear, a silent prayer passing through his gaze. The cop sighed heavily, the sound like grinding stones. He motioned toward the darkened hallway behind him. "Basement's dry for now. Old war-era holding cell down there. Only truly secure place I can offer. You stay one night. That's it. Understand?" Earl nodded, a fragile relief flickering in his eyes, though a shadow lingered deep within. "Thank you, sir." Inside, the basement reeked of damp concrete, rust, and something older, like earth disturbed after a long sleep. A single bulb swung from a frayed wire, casting trembling shadows over iron bars and cracked walls. Inside the cramped cell stood a bare cot, a rusty chain bolted coldly to the wall, relics of a time when hope came with shackles. Earl wrapped the scratchy wool blanket around his shivering frame, the chill seeping through his threadbare clothes like the unforgiving river outside. Water dripped steadily from a fissure in the ceiling, splashing quietly into a spreading puddle at his feet. The air was thick with silence, heavy, suffocating, broken only by the slow, relentless drip. "Just one night," Earl muttered, coughing harshly into his elbow. Thunder rumbled closer, vibrating through the walls, as if the building itself mourned. Hours passed in agonizing stillness. The bulb flickered, uncertainly. The dripping grew louder, steady, merciless. The puddle darkened and spread, cold water inching upward, chilling Earl's skin, stealing warmth from his bones. Panic clawed at his chest. "Hey, anyone, it's flooding!" he shouted, pounding the bars with shaking fists, voice breaking with desperation. The water reached his knees. Coldness numbed his limbs. Lightning stabbed through the small basement window, briefly illuminating an ancient, heavy cast-iron bell sitting silently in a forgotten corner, once used to summon townsfolk, now coated in a thick layer of sacrificial rust. Then, A sharp, haunting chime split the air, from the bell, echoing like a death knell. Earl's breath hitched. He scrambled toward the window, eyes wild, desperate for rescue, for air, anything. But the water surged higher, merciless, unyielding, dragging him down. His hands clawed at the damp walls, chains rattling in cold defiance. His terror cracked through the storm's roar, but outside, the world drowned his cries. Then, silence. Only the faint, lingering echo of the bell remained. Decades later, morning sun pierced the dispersing clouds over Ellis. A yellow school bus rolled to a stop outside the restored Memorial Hall, now the Ellis Railroad Museum and doll display. Children spilled out, laughter and chatter filling the crisp air, unaware of the building's dark secret. Among them, Ronan, 12 years old and small-framed, clutched a worn notebook close to his chest. A quiet boy, who devoured local history and whispered tales of the unexplained, his eyes flicked nervously over the museum's weathered brick, lips moving in a silent whisper. They say ghosts don't scream. They remember. Inside, the tour guide, weathered and tired, yet polite, greeted the group with practiced calm. "Welcome to the Ellis Railroad Museum. Stay close. The doll room is just ahead. And remember, the main basement stairwell is off limits. Structural damage, they say. But some believe it still holds memories. Darker memories." A curious child piped up, "Like haunted?" The guide smiled thinly, saying nothing, as if words might stir shadows. The doll room was colder than the rest of the museum. Rows of antique dolls sat behind glass, their cracked faces frozen in silent, vacant stares. Stiff dresses rustled faintly in an unseen breeze. One doll, separated on a velvet pedestal, was damp, clutching a small, crudely made rusted bell, as if mimicking the larger one from the hall's past. A plaque read, "Recovered from Memorial Hall's flooded basement, 1957, believed to be Earl Parkin's personal item." Jason, 13, cocky and skeptical, leaned toward Ronan. "So, this is where the dolls blink and ghost conductors come to collect souls?" Ronan didn't meet his gaze. "Sometimes, when it rains." Jason snorted. "Right. Next, you'll tell me they drag people into puddles, or that this Earl guy rings a little dinner bell before he tries to give you swimming lessons." Ronan's grip tightened on his notebook. He'd cross-referenced Old Town inventories in his research of the hall. His eyes darted uneasily around the room. There used to be 87 dolls cataloged. Now, there's 88 on display. Jason laughed. "Who donated the extra one? A ghost?" "No one. At least, no one alive." The room fell quiet. The dolls, seeming to watch them with unseen intent. Ronan whispered, "This used to be Memorial Hall. When the Great Flood hit in 1957, Earl Parkins came seeking shelter. They locked him in the basement cell, thinking it's safe. But the water kept rising, and he drowned, just inches below the ceiling." A chill passed through the children. Jason forced a nervous laugh. "So now he's a soggy ghost, huh?" "Boo-hoo." Ronan's eyes glazed, staring past Jason, seeing what others could not. "When it rains, Earl comes back, to find someone new to drown. especially those who mock the flood or the dead. The room temperature dropped sharply. Nearby, the rusted bell in the display doll's hand swung gently by itself, though no breeze stirred. Later, rain hammered the museum's tin roof. Jason asked the teacher to use the bathroom. Wandering down a forgotten hallway, cracked tiles underfoot, flickering lights casting strange shadows. Curiosity, a dangerous current, pulled him toward a battered door marked "Staff Only, Condemned Basement Access." The main basement stairwell might be sealed, but this, he guessed, was an older, forgotten way in. The doorknob, cold and damp, twitched faintly as if alive, urging him to stop. Ignoring the warning, he stepped inside what appeared to be a neglected, disused bathroom just beyond the door. The door slammed shut behind him, the lock clicking tight with a sound of grim finality. The air grew heavy, with the cloying stench of river mud and decay. On the sink counter, a porcelain doll appeared, its presence materializing from the deepening shadows. Its cracked smile was wide, one hand raised in a silent, eerie wave. "No, no," Jason whispered, backing away, an unnatural cold biting deeper than the storm's chill. Suddenly, the mirror above the sink shattered with a deafening clang, shards exploding outwards. Chains, thick with rust and slime, scraped across the tiled floor behind him. From the shadows emerged Earl Parkins, soaked, shackled, eyes pale and rotted, water dripping from tangled hair and tattered clothes, staining the floor with each step. "You mocked the flood. You mocked the bell." Earl's voice gurgled, a sound like waterlogged lungs trying to force out words. "You mocked my agony. Now face it, for eternity." Sometimes later, the night guard arrived, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. The museum smelled of damp earth and cold river water after a storm. Wet, muddy footprints, too large for a child, too heavy for any normal visitor, led him to the doll room. 88 dolls sat staring blankly, except one was new. Dressed in a soaked hoodie, cracked sneakers, its stitched mouth curled into a sinister smile. "Who put you here?" the guard whispered, a shiver tracing its way down his spine. A chain clattered heavily in the hallway behind him. He spun around, heart pounding, empty. Turning back, the new doll had moved. It was closer to the glass, pressed right up against it. Its stitched smile seemed wider, more predatory. For a horrifying instant, the guard thought its painted eyes twitched, following his beam. A soft, wet laugh echoed through the room, seeming to come from the doll itself. Jason's bathroom door, down that forbidden corridor, creaked open. Only muddy puddles remained. A broken shackle lay discarded on the floor, gleaming wetly. Scratched deep into the cracked wall, as if by a fingernail or a piece of rusted metal, were the words, "I was just passing through." Outside, Ronan stood in the rain, the last to leave. The bus was gone. He looked back at the museum's flickering doll room window. For a moment, he saw Jason's pale, horrified face pressed against the glass. Then it vanished, replaced by the impassive stare of the new doll. Ronan watched, a familiar ache of helpless knowledge settling in his chest. "He didn't listen," he murmured to the driving rain. "They never do." Inside, the new doll stood perfectly still. Its stitched mouth twitched just once. Then, with a collective, dry, grating sound, like ancient wood twisting in its joints, all the other dolls slowly turned their cracked heads toward it. The rusted bell tolled once more, soft at first, then swelling, like a cry from beneath the grave. It echoed through walls that no longer breathed, through air that held its breath. Cold, final, and not quite alone. Welcome to Phantom Tales. If you don't believe in ghosts, you will. Subscribe for horror that haunts, and pray the bell doesn't toll. For you. The moonlight cuts through the grand foyer, illuminating polished rose brick walls, and glinting off the bits of broken wrought iron fence embedded in the garden, silent witnesses to countless tragedies. Some houses are born cursed, others earn it. The Mercer-Williams house did both. Savannah's grandest mansion, the Mercer-Williams house, began as a dream interrupted by war and ended as a stage for death. Elegant architectural flourishes, Greek Revival arches, Renaissance-style cornices, hide a trail of blood and whispers. The Persian rug, with its intricate patterns of crimson and gold, was supposed to hide sins, not cradle them, and yet there he was, James Williams, the man who had cheated death and justice 4 times, lay perfectly still on the floor of his meticulously restored study. A faint, cloying scent of day-old perfume hung in the air. His hand, adorned with a heavy gold signet ring, was outstretched. The tips of his fingers almost brushed the very spot on the polished floorboards where, 8 years earlier, his lover, Danny Hansford, had fallen with a bullet in his chest. James Williams was no ordinary man. He was a restoration genius with a flair for drama and a thirst for beauty. When he bought the crumbling mansion in the 1960s, it was more than a project. It was possession. He filled its halls with priceless antiques, velvet drapes, and mirrors that seemed to watch you back. Savannah society clinked champagne glasses beneath chandeliers he'd personally rewired. But Williams had secrets deeper than his wine cellar. He met Danny Hansford, a young man of dangerous charm and volcanic temper. Their affair was both intoxicating and volatile. One was obsessed with preservation, the other with freedom. They were opposites, magnetized, until the magnet snapped. A housekeeper once overheard Danny screaming from behind the study door. "You think these antiques are your prisoners, Jim? Is that what I am? Just another damn trophy for your haunted dollhouse?" On May 2nd, 1981, jasmine bloomed in the garden, and gunpowder burned in the air. Neighbors heard the crash of furniture, then a single chilling gunshot. Danny Hansford lay sprawled on the polished study floor, his blood seeping into the crimson threads of a Persian rug. James Williams stood above him, eerily calm, silver pistol in hand. He claimed self-defense. Savannah didn't believe him. What followed was a media circus, 4 trials, 4 headlines, 4 acquittals. Williams never lost his poise. But something else cracked. After each trial, he returned to his mansion and cleaned and rearranged and polished, as if scrubbing history itself. To a friend, he once whispered, "This house is part of my soul. Leaving it would be a kind of death." And he never did. 8 years after Danny's death, James Williams collapsed in that same study. His hand, still adorned with a gold signet ring, stretched toward the exact floorboard where Danny had fallen. The scent of perfume clung faintly in the air, like a memory that refused to leave. The cause of death? Officially, pneumonia. Unofficially, the house had claimed him. Tour guide Eleanor Holloway had walked Savannah's streets for 60 years, but she never set foot past the foyer. He never really left, she told visitors, voice trembling with something older than fear. You don't pour your soul into a place and expect it to let go. He's still here, and he's not alone. At first, the hauntings were subtle. A book on voodoo fell from a sealed shelf. The ballroom lights flicked on at 3:17 a.m. every night, even when the breakers were off. Staff blamed power surges until the piano played itself. Not a sonata, not a Christmas carol, but a frantic, discordant melody. Notes that sounded like someone trying to scream through ivory keys. Guests reported the unmistakable clink of champagne glasses, faint laughter, and footsteps echoing up the stairs, always just one step behind. One guard, hardened, ex-military, quit after witnessing a tall silhouette glide across the mirror in the hallway, then vanish. I saw my own reflection, he said, and something else, something staring back. Some say Danny Hansford never left either. In the dead of summer, during thunderstorms, staff have heard the unmistakable sound of weeping from the roof, where decades earlier, a boy had died chasing a pigeon. A different ghost, another tragedy, but Danny is angrier. Visitors to the study often complain of dizziness, nausea, and pressure in the chest. One tourist fainted after claiming to hear a voice whisper directly in her ear, "I never had a choice." A psychic named Cassie Drew once attempted a reading in the house. Halfway through, she stood bolt upright and screamed, "Don't open that door!" There was no door behind her. She fled and never returned. "There's something else here," she told a local reporter. "Something older. It feeds on the pain they left behind." The mirrors in the Mercer-Williams house are also never quite right. One visitor reported seeing a man behind her in a gilded mirror, handsome, furious, with blood blooming across his chest. She turned. No one was there. The docent politely asked her to leave. A boy captured a photo on a tour in 2012. It showed a dark silhouette behind the grand piano, hands raised, mid-note. When he looked again, the figure was gone, but a fresh handprint remained on the piano lid. Cold, damp, human-sized. They say mirrors don't lie, but in the Mercer house they remember. A man named Terrence Ricks, a visiting historian, spent a night alone in the home to document paranormal activity. He kept an audio recorder running in every room. At exactly 4:01 a.m., the ballroom mic captured this: soft footfalls, a piano key, then a low male whisper, "Get out." Terrence never released the full recording. He was found sitting on the garden bench the next morning, unresponsive. He later claimed, "They argued all night. James, Danny," another voice I couldn't place. "They weren't arguing with me, but It felt like they could see me. He hasn't spoken publicly since. The Mercer-Williams house still stands. Immaculate, timeless. It is open for tours. You can stand in the same study where two men died, almost identically. You can see the Persian rug, the mirror, the pistol. And if you linger too long, you might hear a voice, just one. Say your name. Some believe James Williams was cursed from the beginning. Others believe he sealed the curse himself with pride and blood and obsession. He won his freedom, Eleanor says, but maybe he only traded one prison for another. Sometimes late at night, tourists will sit in Monterey Square, eyes fixed on the mansion, just when they're about to leave. A flicker, the chandelier blazes to life. Laughter drifts through the open shutters, high, muffled, endless. A shadow sways behind the glass, raising a toast that no one sees. It feels like a celebration, until they realize who the guests are. And they remember what James once said, "This house is part of my soul." He meant it. And the party, it's just getting started. And it will never, ever end. Welcome to Phantom Tales. If you don't believe in ghosts, you will. Subscribe for horror that haunts. And remember, some parties never end, especially when the host refuses to die.